So there's a lot of talk nowadays that there's no free will. And I think that's great. I totally agree. There's no free will. And I really don't see how there could be free will. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. Even the concept of free will doesn't really make sense. I can't see where free will could come from. That's totally fine. And a lot of people are saying it neuroscientists, philosophers, writers. Uh, it's becoming more common to see this kind of stuff in uh, newspapers, books. But there's a serious issue that needs to be considered as soon as you say there's no free will. And I think this issue is ignored by most authors who say that there's no free will. And this issue is, well, one way of putting it is if there's no free will, then I have no free will in saying that. Okay. Or if I conclude that there's no free will, I have no free will in coming to that conclusion. And if I had no free will in coming to that conclusion, how could I know the conclusion was right? Because the conclusion, I came to that conclusion because of, neurons firing or molecules interacting in my brain or other causes or whatever. How can I know that it's just not something that feels right and that it's something that is right? Uh, and this problem is more general than that. I could even say, without free will, how could I know that anything I think is right is actually right? Right? If I come to any conclusion, I had no free will in coming to that conclusion. So, whatever the conclusion is that, let's say 2 plus 2 equals 4, or 2 plus 2 equals 5, or the earth revolves around the sun, or whatever, I have no free will in believing that those things are right. Uh, yeah, so that I think is a big problem to be addressed right away. And uh, as an example, Sam Harris's book Free Will, okay, that's a really popular book that says that there's no free will. And that book doesn't mention this problem once. Okay, I recommend you read that book if you haven't read it, but he completely skips over this issue. Um, I have a couple other books here. This one, Free Will, Agency, and Meaning in Life by Dirk Pereboom. Uh, he also says that there's no free will, and he does include a chapter on what he calls rational deliberation, which is kind of like what I'm talking about. He's trying to he's questioning whether, if there's no free will, if we can engage in rational thought and come to rational decisions. Um, but he doesn't really hit the issue head on, and I don't recommend this book because it's pretty technical and hard to read. It's intended for professional philosophers. There's another book, How Free Are You by Ted Honderich. Um, he also says there's no free will, and I got to give him some credit. He does spend about 2 pages on the issue uh, that I talked about. He does hit it pretty head on, uh, but he doesn't go much in depth, and he kind of just waves it away as being not a big deal. And I'm not happy with how he handles it either. Um, oh, and I do want to give credit to YouTubers, specifically YouTube commenters. I've watched several videos on YouTube where people say there's no free will, and a lot of times the top comment is something like, "Oh well, if you say there's no free will, you had no free will in saying that," and that comment gets a bunch of upvotes. So I do want to give credit to YouTube commenters for being sensitive to this issue, where maybe some professional writers have ignored it. So I just wanted to bring out this issue, and I think it's the biggest issue when you say there's no free will. This has to be dealt with right away. I just wanted to bring it up, and in future videos, I'm gonna get into it more. I'm gonna look at what some people have had to say about it, and then give my own kind of different take on it. So see you in the future videos.